Salvete! Today we'll be talking in this video about principal parts. Now, what principal parts are the most basic forms of a verb from which all other forms can be made. English has three principal parts: the present, the past, and the passive participle. So for instance, from the present, you can make any ing form by following rules. So there are other forms like breaking, but they can be formed by following rules based on the word break. The past cannot be gotten to by simple rules. For instance, the past form of the word break is broke. And then we have the passive participle. Yes, I am using terminology that is a little bit different from an English teacher. The passive participle, broken. Given these three forms, we can get to any other English form of the word, such as I have broken, it has been broken, it will have been broken, it is being broken, etc. On your own, see if you can figure out the other two principal parts for the word freeze. If you figured them out, they are froze and frozen. So we can see certain patterns within principal parts, such as changing the middle vowel of words like break and freeze to a long O sound like broke or froze, and then doing broke N, froze N for the passive participle. That, however, is just one pattern. See if you can identify the past and passive participles for the words buy and catch, which also follow their own pattern. If you got the correct forms, they are bought for both the past and passive participle, and caught for both the past and passive participle. Notice how if you were a speaker of another language learning English as your second language, you would not be able to follow simple rules to get from the word buy to bought or break to broke. Rather, you have to memorize these principal parts. Now those look at least a little bit like what their present forms are, but then we have words where the past and passive participle look completely different from their present, such as the verb go. What are the other two principal parts of the word go? If you got them right, they are went and gone. On the other hand, we do have some words like open and jump, which are the most common pattern. What are the past and passive participles for open and jump? They are opened and jumped, the same for each one. In fact, we can say that ed as an ending is kind of a default for most English verbs. New English verbs, like the verbs to text or to Google, automatically take this sort of default ed ending. So for instance, the past of text is texted, and so is the passive participle. The past of Google is Googled, and so is the passive participle. So we can make a general rule that the default endings for the past and passive parts in English are ed. Now, while English has three principal parts, Latin has four. Let's go over their names first. The first principal part is known as the first person singular present. The second principal part as the present infinitive. The third principal part as the first person singular perfect. And the fourth principal part as the passive participle. Now, you're going to need to know these for the test, but be aware that they are slightly different names than the book gives. I think my names are a little bit more useful. If you write down the memorized principal parts from the book on the test, I will count them wrong. I want you to use these names. So for instance, examples in English, the first principal part would be analogous to the English form break. The second principal part as the present infinitive would be to break. The third principal part would be like the English form broke, and the fourth principal part like the English form broken. Now, just like English had its default set of endings, ed for the past and passive participles, Latin has a certain set of sort of default endings for its verbs as well. And those endings are o, are, avi, atum. So for example, in this chapter, we saw a vocab card with the forms on it: clamo, clamare, clamavi, clamatum. We can use this with old verbs too. See if you can properly figure out the other three principal parts of the verb amo. Pause if you need to. If you got them all right, you should have gotten amo, amare, amavi, amatum. However, we do have three verbs so far with non-standard principal parts. You'll notice that I asked you to make specific vocab cards for these three words for that reason. Those three verbs are do, dare, dedi, and datum, stow, stare, steti, and statum, and sum, esse, fui, futurum. You'll notice that with do, it's got a D and a D in it. For sto, it's got a T and a T. Don't mix those up. That's all for principal parts. Waleta!